In the first reading, we have that incredible scene of victory, of the one who has conquered sin, death, evil, everything is being exalted, and all those are gathered around, and they're rejoicing in that victory. Last night, I saw for the first time an image of what it takes to achieve that kind of victory. Because last night for 5 o'clock Mass, we had invited the children, anyone actually, but it turned out to be the children, anyone to go ahead and come to Mass in your Halloween costume. Because they were going to be heading out right after that to do their work. And what I saw that was truly amazing as we got towards the end of Mass is I saw little children who were gearing up to go out and achieve their victory. And I'll tell you, the look of determination that was growing in these little kids' eyes as they were getting ready to head out of church, I just kind of went, whoa. That's amazing. But we had all kinds of folks in costume last night. We had, Jedi warriors, and we had princesses, and we had different kinds of animals and football players and all sorts of things. And I was glad that I had suggested that we do that since Halloween was on Saturday. When I brought it up at our staff meeting, somebody, and I don't remember who it was, but somebody kind of piped up and said, well, rather than just have them come in whatever costume, why don't we have them come dressed as their favorite saint? And I didn't say anything out loud, which for me is kind of unique. But in my head, the thought that I had was, boring. Not that it's necessarily boring to, dress as your favorite saint. But what the thing that I found was boring was that that's all we can come up with. Don't we have any more imagination than that? Why should we limit our kids to having to figure out what a saint looks like? Do we know what saints look like? Well, for the most part, the only way that we can judge is we have to use religious art. Pictures or drawings or statues of so-called saints. And that was just somebody else's guess. So how do we know what a saint looks like? I'm not sure we do. What makes you a saint? Well, you got to be really, really good, and you got to spend a lot of time in church. and you got to go to confession all the time. No. What makes you a saint? Well, you got to really want it. When you're filling out forms when you're younger and it says career aspirations, you got to write saint in that space. No. You don't become a saint by taking saint classes. You don't become a saint by majoring in saint in college and then 4 years later turning pro. Sainthood does not come through our efforts. People who are truly being saints aren't trying to be saints because they're not focusing on themselves and measuring their own holiness. They're just trying to live life, to share the love of God that they have received. Not for the reward that they think they'll get, but just because it's the natural thing to do. What does a saint look like? Well, look around. We got all kinds of different faces in here. I'll bet there's a bunch of saint faces in here. But we can't know. And we shouldn't worry about knowing. Jesus warned us we can't know. You look at the Beatitudes, you look at Jesus beginning his Sermon on the Mount. He's trying to teach his disciples about this reality of the reign of God. And in essence, he's saying, you wouldn't know a saint if you saw one, because you're looking for all the wrong things. We think a saint is probably somebody who is blessed, who has special favor from God. And maybe they're well off and they're famous or whatever. Jesus said, no. Saints are going to be the ones who we wouldn't look at and say, that's a saint. Saints are going to be the ones that we would look at and say, oh, those poor people. How unfortunate for them. How sad. I'm glad I'm not having to go through what they're going through. They're unfortunate, those poor schlubs. And Jesus says, no. Those are the ones that are closest to God. In the kingdom, the categories are different. Our way of thinking as to what's important is different from God's way. And again, it is the grace of God working in people and through people that brings about his kingdom. And the ones that we call saints, the ones that are canonized and get on the church calendar, there's a lot more saints in heaven than just those few. They just, I don't know, maybe they had better publicists or agents or something. You can't look at somebody's face and know if they're a saint. You need to look in their heart. Because saints remember certain things. If you're a saint, you remember that your life is a gift to the world. If you're a saint, you remember that you are a unique creation. There will never be another just like you. If you're a saint, you remember to count your blessings, not your troubles. If you're a saint, you remember to always reach for the best that is within you. That's why God puts it there. If you're a saint, you remember that nothing wastes more energy than worry. If you're a saint, you remember that not getting what you want is sometimes a blessing or a wonderful stroke of luck. If you're a saint, you remember that the longer you carry a grudge, the heavier it gets. If you're a saint, you remember not to take things too seriously. And if you're a saint, you remember to laugh. If you're a saint, you remember that a little love goes a long way, and a lot goes on forever. If you're a saint, you remember that happiness is more often found in giving than getting. If you're a saint, you remember that life's treasures are people, not things. That's where we find God. If you're a saint, you might get caught off guard, but you remember and you respond quickly. Because if you're a saint, you remember that God is good! All the time. Caught some of you by surprise. Let's try it again, saints. God is good! All the time. All the time? Ooh. Sounds like we got some saints here. That's cool.